Cordelia is absolutely a master storyteller. I recently just finished watching a great series on one of the streaming platforms. And if you haven't seen it, don't watch this video. But if you have seen it, buckle up, because it's a great story, a great series. And what I loved about it was the protagonist, the main character, and her storytelling ability. If you're new here, my name's Andrea Sampson. And I work with speakers and thought leaders and experts and help them to become storytellers. If you have been here before, then you know that the topic of this video is not one that I usually talk about, but I thought I would actually dive into it because it's really fun and it is about storytelling. The series is called The Residents, and the protagonist, the main character, is this quirky, amazing woman by the name of Cordelia Cupp. And Cordelia is apparently the world's best detective. And she's been brought in to solve a murder. Now, all throughout this series, we see Cordelia going into storyteller mode. And there's one specific instance of storyteller mode that I thought would be really fun for us to maybe deconstruct a little bit and look at what was actually going on. So let me set up what has happened. Now, in this world of Cordelia Cupp, she's actually at the White House. The murder has taken place at the White House. In this world, the president and his partner, the first man, the first gentleman, are living at the White House. And then along with them, of course, are all of the people who work around the presidency. So everything from the social secretary to the serving people within the White House. There is something called the chief usher, which I hadn't realized existed, but apparently is sort of like the chief of staff of those who work at the White House. And so we have a large grouping of people in this particular scenario. So they are all gathered around because Cordelia has gathered them all together as being the primary suspects. She is about to solve the murder. This scene is taking place in the very last episode. So again, if you have not watched the episode or have not watched the series, don't watch this video yet. Go and watch the series, then come back and watch this video. She's taking them on a little bit of a tour of the White House because it has been quite an unfolding of events that happened on the night of this particular murder. Now, prior to this scene, she has let everybody know that she hasn't yet decided who the killer is, but that it will be revealed to her and that the killer will in fact reveal themselves. At this point, there's probably, I'm gonna say about 15 of them. She's moving them from room to room and they come into this final room. Cordelia is giving her summation of what she believes actually happened. Somebody reveals that at about the time of the murder, there was a phone call made from the first gentleman. And that phone call asked that the second floor, which is where they all are at this point in time, be vacated. And this implicated quite directly the first gentleman as being the killer. And suddenly everybody looks at the first gentleman. He is the weakest character in the room. And as such, would be easy to pin a murder on because he doesn't really have any backbone to be able to defend himself appropriately. And even as the president is asking him if this is true, his ability to defend himself is really weak. And of course, everybody in the room is now looking at him and looking at Cordelia with the expectation that she is going to say, see, the killer has revealed himself. But instead, as they look at Cordelia, what does she do? Well, in true master storyteller fashion, what Cordelia does is she doesn't address the first gentleman at all. Instead, she directs our attention to the wall behind him. And she says, if we look at this wall, we see it's covered in wallpaper. And so as she directs us to the wallpaper, we notice that there's a bird on it. And if you've been watching the show, you know what's coming is a bird story, because she has told us many, many bird stories at this point. So this particular bird story, she says to us, look at the wallpaper. Now that bird is called a rail warbler. It is a rare bird. If you know the rail warbler, you would be as confused as I am about it, because it is neither a rail nor a warbler. But instead, what it does is it emulates other birds. It has the ability to expertly communicate in the sounds of other birds. It confuses the area around it, which is how it survives. It's a defense mechanism. And of course, she's using a metaphor. She's using a story. She has taken a tension point in the story that she is creating with this group. And at a moment when everybody thought she was going to reveal the killer, instead, she gave us a distraction. Why did she do that? Well, she did it because what she recognized was to either confirm or refute what had just been said would have played into the actual killer's hand, because it would have created more distraction. That room was ready to jump on or defend any accusation that was being made in that moment. And instead, what she did was she took us on a little journey to meet this rail warbler. And in doing that, she gave us a piece of information that was critical to what just happened. That piece of information was the fact that the rail warbler had the ability to emulate other voices. Now, we had just heard that the first gentleman's voice over the phone had ordered a floor to be vacated. And the rail warbler has the ability to emulate other birds. Isn't that interesting? And as she went down this metaphoric road, what she's done is she has disarmed everybody in that room. So rather than there being an uproar of, well, now who was it? Everyone was in a place of receiving and thinking and considering. And of course, what happens is the killer reveals themselves. And in that moment, everything changed. And that is what a good storyteller does. They know how to use story as a way to change the tension in a room, to use the tension in a room, to build upon what has already been said, to take something that is so obscure like bird watching or facts about birds that, of course, probably no one in that room really cared about, quite frankly. I mean, she was the bird watcher, not anyone else. But because she was the bird watcher, because she was so passionate about it, because she knew so much about it, every person in that room leaned in. They wanted to hear where she was going with this seemingly ridiculous story. And yet, that story was the very thing that had the killer reveal themselves. And this is the power of storytelling. It doesn't matter whether or not our story is relevant to what's happening in that moment or seemingly. Her story, the story of the rail warbler, the story of the wallpaper, seemingly was not relevant. But because Cordelia understood what was going on and knew how to use story, she brought the relevance. She found the connection. She allowed the audience to become emotionally engaged in something other than the murder that they were all in that room for. And in the emotional engagement with the rail warbler, she was then able to flush out a killer. When we use stories in our own presentations and our own talks, Hopefully they're not about fleshing out a murderer, but they often are about conveying complex and difficult information. And when we use story to do that, stories that we connect with deeply can be stories that we have lived directly or stories that we love because they're about the thing we are most passionate about. When we use those stories, we create connections with our audiences that wouldn't be there otherwise, that our audience wouldn't be able to access or understand without the bridge of that story. Cordelia is absolutely a master storyteller and an expert bird watcher. And so she allowed us to understand a little more about her world, about her view, but most importantly, about who conducted that murder. Watch the series. It's epic. If you have watched the series, comment below. Tell me more about the stories that you heard. There were so many bird stories in that series. I have learned more about birds than I ever thought that I wanted to know. But at the same time, I've really come to appreciate the power of story in a whole new way. I hope you've enjoyed this because it is a little different from what I typically do. You know, typically I talk a lot about storytelling as a way to convey your complex messages, as a way to build your thought leadership and to become better leaders in the companies and organizations in which you work and serve. And look, if you are interested in using story in your world, in your leadership, in your speaking, in your presentations, reach out. We have tools, we have programs, we have all kinds of ways to support you, to help you maybe one day become a little more like Cordelia Cupp.